So we've got a 2011 or 2012 F350 6.7 diesel. Complaint is a check engine light, and he told me that it was missing. He has a phone scanner. He was giving me all kinds of useless information that, you know, I just, whatever. But anyway, so what we're going to do, we'll go in, we'll use the launch today because it was handy, and we'll scan the codes because the check engine light's on, and then we'll see what other tests and what other data we need to look at to try to determine why this thing is misfiring. So this truck came from, looks like it came from a municipality, you know, city or something, maintenance, you know, parks maintenance or something like that. Generally, if it's a sizable enough municipality, they're going to have a fleet manager, and they're going to run a really professional operation, you know, on par with a dealership, you know, as far as the way they do things and the way they're trained, and you know, the way they maintain their vehicles. So if you buy one from a big enough you know, at an auction or something, you're probably going to get a pretty good truck because it's going to be pretty well, impeccably maintained. Because I mean, basically that's all these guys have to do in that shop is maintain these vehicles, so that's all they're doing. So they generally do a really good job of it. So, and this one looks to be in fairly good shape, even though it's a 2011. So I didn't check the mileage on it. We'll look at that when we get in there. But we'll go ahead and take the launch in there, plug it in, and see what we can figure out. So let's go do that. Got the battery charger on it. I mean, the battery sounded a little bit weak to me, so. Oh boy. Okay. Let's plug this in down here. I heard it beep, so that's good. We got power. Oh. Okay, get my glasses on so I can see here. Some days I like this launch and some days I hate it, but we'll see how it goes today. So let's go ahead and turn the key on. Intelligent. See what happens here. Boy, the lift pump is really making a racket. I should check the fuel volume on it too while I'm, you know, when I'm under the hood there. I'll go ahead and do a volume test on that lift pump and make sure we're getting enough fuel up here. Because these do have the CP4, and I've got a CP4 pump here, and one of these days I'll do a video on it and show you exactly what goes wrong with them and why. So diagnose. I guess I already had it VIN'd in. No, that was another truck I looked at yesterday. Oh well, probably would have worked just fine. Okay, no navigation. Well, we don't want to do that. My subscription is not lapsed. I have 2 years worth. So let's go to powertrain, which is right there. Probably haul a few goats back there in the bed. It's a flatbed. You'd have to put leashes on all of them, but you might be able to get 10 or 15 goats in there. I need to get some more goats. They're fun. I had a goat named Harry, and he thought he was a dog. Let's see. Okay, we want to read fault codes, do the continuous memory. I just got done pulling an engine, so I'm kind of out of... okay, so we got a contribution balance cylinder number 7. So we got freeze frame, mode 2. Let's go ahead and look at that. See what it says. I kind of want to get an idea of engine temperature, if it'll tell us that. Well, I thought there were pages that you could... Well, anyway, I don't see engine temperature, but I do see 118 degrees on the charge air cooler, so obviously it was up to temperature. That's really all I wanted to know, because I sure didn't feel it misfiring when I pulled it in here, but it's cold. So the next thing we should do is, let's go ahead and do a relative compression. Okay, the ignition is on. Why is it priming the fuel pump? Okay. Oh, I hear it. That was the longest 10 seconds. Okay, so we got a 1% on 2. I'm not worried about that. That's pretty normal, and it even states normal. So cylinder number 7 here, we look at it. It's down, has a difference of 16%, which is quite a lot. So, and I don't know if you could hear it or not during the cranking cadence, but I can't really tell if that's, you know, like the scenario, you know, let's say we had an injector that was leaking and it's leaking a little bit of fuel into the cylinder. I don't think it's that, but I've been wrong before. So if that was the case, it would slow down every time that cylinder number 7 came up on compression. It would draw more current. You know, the starter's going to draw more current because it's, you know, coming up against that hydrolock or whatever you want to call it. The other thing is if we had a compression issue with a valve or something, I know these like to crack exhaust valves. You know, if we were leaking compression out of an exhaust valve, you know, and it's speeding up. I can't tell by the cadence if it's speeding up or slowing down. It's hard. It's really hard to tell. But I did take a really good mental note of this, and I'm going to, once I diagnose and figure out what exactly is going on with it, I'll kind of remember that sound that it made, because that may be, you know, that straining may be that next cylinder, because it's speeding up and then hitting compression on the next cylinder in the firing order. And, you know, that's where you're hearing that straining. So I don't know that. I have no way of knowing right now if because it's not, quote, hydrolocked. I mean, it's turning over, but you know, I really have no way of knowing, is it hydrolocking a little bit, which I kind of don't think it is, because I'm trying to think of the scenario where it would hydrolock a little bit. And you know, I let this thing sit overnight, so if it was dribbling, I mean, there'd be a lot of fuel in the cylinder. It would actually hydrolock. So I don't think that's what we have going on. So what can we do here? What we can do is we'll go back. We'll go to the data stream. Jesus, load. And then we'll go down. We have a engine idle. You know, when the engine's idling, it's got a fuel balancing. So, and looks like it's in mg, milligrams. Anyway, let's pull up cylinder number 7, and we'll pull up a couple of more here just to compare them. So values at 0 now. We have a range of negative 353 to positive 353. So that's our range, you know, and we probably want to be somewhere, I don't know where these things run, but anyway, we don't want to be at 0.353 in either direction. So let's start this thing and we'll monitor those, or that one on number 7. Boy, that lift pump. Okay, so she started up. And right away we can see that number 7 is in the positive. Oh, it's right at 353. So basically what this is doing is it's adding fuel. I mean, it's fixed right on 353, and as you can see, that's our range. Negative 3.353 to a positive 0.353. and we're at positive 353. So what this thing is doing is it's basically trying to balance the idle. That's what we're trying to do, you know. So it's adding fuel and you know, it's measuring the rotational velocity of the crankshaft through the crank sensor, and it's measuring the RPM drop or speed up, and it's going to add fuel or take away fuel based on the rotational velocity of the crankshaft. So if it's slowing, you know, if it's going slower, you know, when it comes up on that cylinder, because on the Powerstroke, because it's not firing the fuel properly, you know, or completely, and you're not going to get, you know, you're not going to get the combustion pressure. It's not going to, you know, that piston isn't going to speed up. It's actually going to be slowing down, which if you overfuel it to a point, it will slow down. You know, it won't fire, it won't burn all that fuel. You'll have a super rich mixture. So anyway, back to my point. I lost my train of thought there. Yeah, we can get some goats in there. Well, where was I? Oh yeah, we were talking about the balancing rate. So basically, it's going through and trimming the fuel while it's idling to keep the engine balanced, you know, to keep it from chopping, or, you know, to keep the engine balanced. And they do a really, I mean, especially, you know, modern vehicles do a really good job of that. You know, the processors are pretty damn fast, and the algorithms, they, you know, I mean, they've pretty much got that stuff figured out. So they do a really good job. So basically that's what it's doing. It's trimming the balance rates on the injectors to keep the engine balanced, you know, at an idle. So as we can see, it's adding fuel, trying to bring the RPMs up, you know, trying to make that cylinder speed up and stay even with the rest of them. And we're maxed out positive. Our we'll call it a fuel trim, I guess, is maxed out. So that means that's all it can do. It can't do any more. That's its range, you know, 0.353 positive or negative. You know, you have that full range between those two numbers. And I'm not sure what the quantity is there. Is it ounces or milligrams or whatever? But anyway, whatever the quantity measurement is there, that's what it's adding and subtracting. That's what those numbers mean. And it's not able to do that, so it's maxed out, and it's still not bringing that cylinder up. So that kind of leads me to believe right now that we have, and I could be wrong, but what I need to do now, if I really wanted to see what was going on there, I would use an amp probe on the starter wire and the scope. And I don't even need to sync it off of a cylinder to see which cylinder it is, because, you know, you saw 1 and 2 were 1% and the rest of them were at 0 during the power balance, and number 7 was at 16 or 17, whatever it was, percent. That's going to show, that's going to stand out like a sore thumb. So what I would be looking for there is, I would be looking for, you know, if it was a hydrolock or a say a valve, you know, not opening, and not a, you know, exhaust valve not opening and not allowing that pressure out of the cylinder, you know, you still have some pressure in there when you're cranking it, or when the engine's run. Well, I don't think that's it, but I mean, that can happen too. I've seen that where on a 6 liter, where you know, guys will, I don't know what they're doing, they'll over RPM them, and they've got a ton of preload on the lifters, you know, and they'll float the valves because they're not, you know, they don't have racing valve springs in them. So they'll float the valves, and the valves are, there isn't much clearance at the critical point between the piston and the valves on any of these diesel engines. So if you float the valves, you're going to be kissing a piston. And generally what it does on the cylinder head is flat, and generally the valves are square flat with the top of the piston. So basically what happens there is the piston will touch it and push it closed, you know, while the valve's floating, and a lot of times that'll bend a push rod. So I've ran into that on 6 liters where it's bent a push rod on the exhaust side, and it wasn't I mean, that air can't escape out of there. It's got to come out the intake when the intake opens. So they run pretty bad, and they do weird things, like when you're cranking them, you know, and you have the intake off the turbo, you'll see every time that cylinder comes up, you'll see the turbo move. You know, it'll be puffing out the turbo back, you know, the turbo will be spinning backwards. But anyway, if I use the scope on it and the high amp probe, which I don't know if my high amp probe, because I haven't used it for a while, I don't know if it works. I'll have to make sure the battery's good in it and stuff. And I can set that up on the scope, and then I'll look at that waveform, you know, the current. I'll do, you know, basically you're doing a current ramp or a current draw on the starter, and every time, you know, you'll see these series of humps on it, and it'll be amperage. You know, the high point will be amperage and the low point will be amperage. And so when you come up on compression, that starter's working harder, so your amperage is going to go up. So what I would expect to see on this, because I suspect we probably have an exhaust valve leaking. I mean, it's not leaking real bad because I can't even tell it's misfiring, but obviously we have a compression, some sort of a compression issue going on there, because you heard the cranking cadence. Every time that cylinder comes up, the current, the amperage is going to go down on that cylinder. So I'll be able to pick it out really easy, and it'll tell me whether I have a hydrolock problem or maybe a bent. Well, these have, I can't think of a scenario where this would not be opening the exhaust valve enough, unless because basically we have two exhaust valves and we have a lifter that has two little lifters in them, basically slack adjusters, and they're hydraulic too. So if we had, I guess if we bent one push rod, or we had something going on with a lifter where it was collapsed, but I don't hear any noise here. So the first thing, I don't know, it's cylinder number 7, pretty easy to get at over here. You pull that felt cover off the valve cover. I think it'll pop a glow plug out, and I'll be able to check, you know, do a leak down on it and see if I have any leakage going on out an intake or an exhaust. It's probably an exhaust valve though, because like I said, these things do have issues with exhaust valves. So I think, you know, armed with the information I have, I don't know, I'm still gonna have to do some sort of a compression or leak down test. So I think I'll just skip my well, I might do that, I don't know. I need to find my high amp probe and make sure the battery's good in it. I might have to go get batteries and maybe set that up on the scope, and then take a look at the you know, do a power balance or a current, you know, a current ramp on the starter, and see, you know, if I Jesus, now I forgot what that's going to tell me. Okay, so what, and what that'll tell me is if my starter is working harder or working less. So, but ultimately I think that we are still going to have to do a compression or a leak down test on it. And if we do a leak down test, the way I do it on the diesels is, you know, you're always going to have a certain amount leaking past the rings in them. And let me check the mileage on this thing. Okay, so we got 128,000 miles, and I'm assuming that, you know, since it's a municipal truck, that's not many miles, not too many miles. It probably was really well maintained. It didn't leave any, I don't see any oil spots under it, so it's not leaking oil. So I'm going to say it's probably been pretty well maintained. So we probably have a leaking exhaust valve. So I think I'll jump right over the current ramp test on the starter, or do the power balance with the scope. And we'll go, since it's number 7, it's easy to get at. I will close those valves, you know, make sure those valves are closed on that cylinder, and I'll do a leak down on it, and we'll listen for air coming out the exhaust or the intake, which, and like I was saying, we're going to have, you know, a certain amount of pressure blowing past the rings, so we're going to hear air coming out of the crankcase, but we're not too concerned about that, unless it has a cracked piston or something. But it would have to be a pretty slight crack for it to, you know, I don't know. It's, I hate tearing these 6.7s apart, because, you know, you can't even see the engine, and thank God cylinder number 7 is on the on the left bank, or the driver's side bank, because if it was on the other side, then we'd be over there screwing with the EGR cooler, having to pull it, which that's not that big a deal to pull off, but the left side's a lot easier to pull off. So I think that's what we'll do. We're going to go right to a leak down test, and that'll tell us right there, because I have a hunch that we do have a leaky exhaust valve or something going on the exhaust side of the cylinder sealing. So let me quit yakking here, and we'll get going on that. So let me get that set up, and we'll try that. So we've got a 6.0 here on the table, on the operating table, and it's basically a reseal. Cylinders look great. Bearings, from what I saw, I pulled the lower bearings out of the bed plate there. I'll lift the crank up a little bit and slide the uppers out, because that's where all the wear is going to be. But as far as I can see, man, I mean, the crankshaft is just beautiful. And this is a 200,000 mile motor, but it was leaking everywhere. I mean, every gasket was leaking. The oil pans basically fell off of it, just a lot of years on it. So front cover, rear cover, oil cooler, front seal, rear seal, everything on this was leaking. Valve cover gaskets leaking, rocker carriers leaking. So we're gonna reseal it all. We cleaned it all up, and we'll put new bed plate seals in it, oil pan gaskets, front rear cover, head gaskets, oil, we'll go through, we'll put an oil cooler in it too. It's got some new parts on it because it's had some work recently. Water pump, we'll reuse the water pump because it's not even a year old, and we'll keep oil in this and maybe get another 100,000 miles out of it. I really don't see why that is not possible, because I mean, this thing is in really good shape. It's been fairly well cared for. So other than the oil leaks, but when they start leaking oil, sometimes it's just easier just to yard the motor out, because the upper oil pan leaks, lower oil pan leaks. When you start having leaks like that, you can do that in the truck, but when everything's leaking, it really makes more sense just to pull it out, just yard her out of there, tear it apart, clean everything up, wash everything up, put some new gaskets in it, put it back together. I mean, I probably wouldn't do that on a junky motor with that had a lot of blow by and stuff like that. It probably wouldn't be worth it, but if everything's, if it's in good shape, then no reason not to spend the money on it, considering the cost of a new truck. But the other thing is too, no matter what you do to it, it's still a 6.0 diesel, so you still have all those stupid problems that they have, even after you do all this stuff. But maybe it'll get down the road in another 5 years and keep him from he just doesn't want to buy, he's got a lot of trucks because he's in business, and he doesn't want to buy a new pickup, because pickups, I mean, hell, he could buy a F550 or a truck, at a medium duty truck for less than you can buy a pickup for. So it doesn't make any sense for him to buy a pickup. So we're gonna resurrect the old F350 for him so he can get a few more years out of it. So anyway, I'll keep you posted on this. I got a EGR cooler to do here. On the old 2011 here, I went ahead and I did the leak down test on cylinder number 7, and I can hear air leaking, and it's coming out of the exhaust. So we've got something going on with an exhaust valve, something to do with the cylinder sealing on the exhaust side. So gonna back burner this for a few days, because I have an excursion out there that needs a EGR cooler put on it, and got a 4R100 out there in a 2002 F250 that with a diesel that needs to be overhauled. I was trying to find a used transmission just to turn it around quick, one we knew worked, and just pop it apart and throw some new clutches and rubbers and solenoid pack in it and stuff, and maybe a new converter just to freshen it up. But you can't find them now. You know, I mean, I did find one in Redding, California, and they wanted $300 to get it. You know, by the time I got it up here, it would have been like $2,800 my cost just to buy a used transmission, and you know, I can rebuild one for $1,500 and make everything brand new in it. So hopefully Portland Transmission has, you know, lots of hard parts in stock in case we need any drums or any of that kind of stuff. But anyway, we'll be doing that too next week, getting that out of here, and as well as putting that 6.0, regasketing it and getting it back in there. But anyway, so yeah, this was kind of an interesting one. You know, cylinder head's coming off. It's got to come off of there, so we're going to be doing kind of a little bit of a major tear here to get this thing apart and you know, visually get a visual on the valve, you know, see exactly what's going on there. But you know, 128,000 miles, probably well worth fixing. Like I said, municipal truck, looks like it had some pretty damn good maintenance done on it in its life, so should be in pretty good shape, and it's not leaking any oil anywhere, so well worth fixing, and well worth the you know, some of the shit is kind of risky, you know, when you take these old trucks and you know, you do a $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 repair on them, and then, you know, the thing goes out and then something else breaks, you know, blows up, or, you know, who knows, you know, something else goes wrong with it. So if I have any questions about anything at all, you know, we're gonna have a conversation. Hey, we should short block this thing, or, you know, whatever, because it's not, you know, it isn't worth all of the hassle or the money, or maybe the truck's not even worth putting the money into. So you know, those are all things to consider. So anyway, I hate Fords, but they pay the bills. So anyway, have a good weekend.